Well, welcome to the session titled Not to Sound Alarmist, but okay. It's it's a kind of a leading title, I'll give you that. So we're going to talk today about how nonprofits can thrive, grow, perhaps obtain more resilience even in an unprecedented time, both in terms of technology, security, and the political scene. So we'll do a quick introduction to us. I'm Kim Snyder, 3DPO. I won't even get into it. We don't have time for that. We are from RoundTable Technology, which is a strategic technology partner, which does mission-driven technology solutions and managed services practices, and we serve nonprofit organizations.
I'm Joshua. I'm here with Kim, and yeah, let's jump into it. So Neela said in the chat, it's hard to know where to begin. The uncertainty is overwhelming. Totally hear that, Neela. And a lot of, I think, what Kim and I want to share today is both a little bit about why it feels that way, and hopefully how to kind of situate yourselves in such a way that you're not only able to respond to kind of what's currently going on, but to all the unknown things that may come up in the future. The idea that uncertainty and change is increasingly just a part of how things are for a range of reasons, some of which will probably be very obvious to you, and some of which might be less obvious to you. All right. But what risks are keeping you up at night? You can let us know in the chat. Is it cybersecurity threats? Is it the political climate? Is it AI adoption? Is it, you know, college acceptance rates? Is it retirement savings or lack thereof? Is it you could pick things that aren't on the list, but let us know in the chat what is keeping you up at night. And if nothing, if you're sleeping like a baby through the night, then I am very jealous as a lifelong insomniac. So, all right. What keeps you up at night, Kim?
Well, oh gosh. I would say
This is being recorded, Kenneth.
I'll let that one stand. Um, yeah, I mean, I would say the times we're in certainly keep me up at night thinking how can we help nonprofits like be here and meet this. So
Yeah.
that keeps me thinking. Um,
Okay. Political seems to be the dominant one so far, Kim.
all right, so we're gonna hit some of and Medicaid. So I would just talk about cybersecurity just is still very much an issue for nonprofits. Okay, this is from a study by the Cyber Peace Institute, right? Where that was a large percentage. I think a lot of these were based in Europe, but still, I will get into why this is continues to be a phenomenon in the next slide. But so 41% have experienced a cyber attack in the past years. Um, and that doesn't mean had a breach, that means experienced an attack. And 56, though, did not have a budget. 56% did not have a budget for cybersecurity. So that just
Which, by
speaks.
the way, I'm shocked that 44% did have a budget for
Yeah,
cybersecurity. Like,
terrific.
I'm actually, that seems crazy. I would have guessed like 5% actually have a cybersecurity budget, because I wouldn't even say 50% of nonprofits that I work with have a budget for technology, let alone cybersecurity. Anyway.
So there you have it. So, but in the next slide, so just to why are nonprofits a target? And this can increase in times where things are unstable, um, in a tough political landscape. But so nonprofits are known to have rich data. So rich in data, you got good data, you got people data, you have especially any organizations that are working around areas that might be particularly targeted. But you have, if nothing else, you have people data, probably because you collect donations, have some money data in there, right? And so resource rich, but security poor, right? So those, the 56% not having a budget for cybersecurity, right? So that's a kind of cyber criminals know this. So, and this, they've known this for a while. So nonprofits have always kind of rated more highly than you would think, even though some may say, well, wait, we don't have, like, we're not Pepsi, we're not, Merck, we're not some huge, you know, corporation, why would they go after us? So it's this dynamic that makes nonprofits a target.
Can
Um,
I, do I have like 1 minute for a
yeah,
rant about cyber liability insurance?
okay,
Um,
okay.
so another part of it that I think is not sort of as commonly known is that the insurance providers, in some respects, created the problem that is now becoming everybody's problem. In that they started selling cyber liability insurance, going back about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, very heavily, and in some respects created a market for ransomware, although that wasn't the intent. The insurers basically were like, oh, people want to buy cyber liability insurance. Great. We'll sell somebody $1 million policy and we don't know anything about it, but that's fine. And so they started giving everybody cyber liability insurance. And so if you were a nonprofit organization, you only had like $500,000 budget, you weren't really much of a target because there wasn't a lot of value. But if the attackers can get in and see that you have a $1 million cyber liability insurance, then that's very easy. They know exactly how much to ask for. So that started happening with all these ransomware attacks. Then the cyber liability insurers started losing massive amounts of money on these policies. And now, if you have tried to get a cyber liability insurance policy of late, you know that the questionnaires are becoming more and more rigorous and annoying. And that is why, because they are like, oh, we have to actually figure out what it is we're selling and how much risk we're taking in that. So that's a brief history of cyber liability insurance.
But not at all an argument about not getting it.
No, you should get it. You should absolutely
Get
have
it.
it.
That said, yeah, you should definitely get it. So, and kind of added to this, bundle is privacy regulations have been sprouting up in different states. And in some states, including New York, just a little preview, not sure this is going to get across the finish line. We're toward the end of the legislative session, but it's could be a New York Health Information Privacy Act may be passing. So, and that will have more that'll kind of have a broader scope than, say, HIPAA, right? It covers more groups that have health-related data. So, and we're seeing more and more of this happen. When I first started giving sessions on the topic of privacy, which was probably about 5 years ago now, this map was a lot of gray and not much green and little spots of blue. So these states are adopting this and increasingly, I mean, even today we have from Washington State, oh, actually, Olympia, Washington, you have one intense Health Privacy Act, okay, that kind of, it's almost like you do. They should color it in green for that one. So so it's so these are things we have to be aware of because all of a sudden what privacy legislation does, in addition to saying people like they have rights over their information, it also imposes business obligations on those who collect that data. So that's to say, I need to be able to responsibly take care of your data if I'm going to collect it, and that means being able to secure it, right? So that's the implication of privacy regulation in this context of the things we're talking about today. So the need for security. This is another reason why cybersecurity matters. How does it get, how does data get breached, right? It's often through cyber attacks or also by accident from people. But there are security measures you can put in place. They're kind of basic, and we'll be talking about that.
I feel like we need like a different color for Florida, where it's just like laughing. Like,
Oh,
like, do you really think like Florida will ever get get privacy insurance? No, absolutely not.
I'm not betting on that state, but
Uh, not happening anytime soon. All right. So because Kim makes the slide decks, she's going to assign me the part that's all the bummer, where I'm going to tell you about all the things that are, causing you challenges right now, and then Kim's going to get to talk you through. And here's how you get all those better. And then, look, I accept this. It's just the reality of if I made the decks, then I could give myself the nice part, but I don't. I'm not so lucky. So, um, operational challenges that we are dealing with right now, right? So there's obviously the political volatility, and it's kind of nuts, right? It's a deliberate form of chaos that is creating huge amounts of disruption with very little warning. and very little idea of what's going to happen, what will continue happening, what will be legally upheld, what will not. And it's a pretty targeted attack at the nonprofit sector writ large, specifically aspects of the nonprofit sector that are not ideologically aligned with the current administration. And there's all sorts of rationales put out for that, but I think it's pretty obvious for most of us that it's just a pure disruption, defunding tactic around these nonprofits. And because of that, you're getting, of course, all this funding uncertainty. Obviously, if you rely on federal funds in any regard or state funds in any regard, those are hugely at risk. Even if you have, as someone mentioned, constituents that use your services that receive Medicaid, right? That's at risk. So this is going to continue to be a massive challenge for the foreseeable future. And it is probably unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. So it's an unprecedented challenge, and that's just the reality of it. And then on top of that, there are all of these technology challenges. Now, the nice thing about the technology challenges is that they also are opportunities, and that's where Kim's going to get to share a lot of that with you. But currently, where you have AI posing threats to you, where you have a lot of what's called shadow IT, which is staff using AI tools and other tools without your knowledge and potentially compromising sensitive information or doing other things that might harm your mission. And then, of course, all of the traditional cybercrime, much of which is now getting worse because the cyber criminals are using AI to aid their efforts, which turns out to be incredibly effective because there's no language barrier to like socially engineering people in English now. So we've effectively made the entire world, whether they speak a lick of English or not, capable of writing extraordinarily effective phishing communications and deploying them. So that's a bummer. And so 62% of our citing changes in federal funding is impacting their work. Organizations are being sidetracked from missions. They're getting pulled into all these crazy legal battles and funding disruptions. And that the the nastiness of the bipartisan divide is also affecting their organizations and their cultures and things like that. And this is just, again, the reality of sort of where we're at in this moment. Now, switching gears to artificial intelligence, what this is showing, okay, is we have here a human performance benchmark and then AI capabilities in all of these different areas. And what you'll see is that, starting in 1998, so if we go back in time, this was like kind of a pretty flat line and things were not really getting. We had chess getting superhuman performance in like 1997. Jeopardy got there in I think 2011 was Jeopardy, right? But most of these other things that can really be used to do the kind of work that many of us do, you didn't get unless your job is answering Jeopardy questions or playing chess. But I'm guessing most of you do not have that particular job. That just started happening in the last 10 years. And of course, it doesn't stop, right? These things are going to continue to get better. And a lot of that has to do with just the exponential nature of technology. So you have all these different factors of increased amounts of data that are available for these systems to analyze, increased amount of processing power for them to use, and then people get better at developing these things. And this continues to build on itself. So this exponential growth, we're at a phase now where it's going, and I'm guessing most of you have felt this over the last couple of years, extraordinarily fast. Kim and I have been working in technology for 31 years at this point, and we both have been through, the World Wide Web. We've been through relational databases, coming online, computer networks, social media, email, and all these other things. And we have not seen anything that comes close to the pace of change that we are seeing with AI right now. It's really something quite different that I think requires a different approach and a different mindset. And I'm going to be frank, and nonprofits are not alone in this. Businesses are not doing much better as a whole, but nonprofits are doing terribly at adopting this, absolutely terribly. So over 3/4 don't have any strategy. 4/5 don't have an acceptable use policy. I mean, Kim and I have been sharing a free acceptable use policy for over 2 years now, and we still can't get organizations to adopt, right? But they have an interest in it. And here's the other thing, although you don't have great data on it, something around 70 to 80% of your staff are using AI tools in their work for your organization every day, whether you have told them about them or not, whether you have an acceptable policy or not, whether you have a strategy or not. And so when Kim and I say we're doing terribly for a lot of different reasons. Um, and so there is pressure, but there's also, I think, a different resistance to artificial intelligence. So I think traditionally we've always had a little bit of a resistance to technology adoption because it's new, it's different, it's difficult. I have to learn something new. The whole don't want to change if they don't absolutely have to. And so there's always been that resistance to technology adoption. What I have found interesting about AI is there's another level of resistance, which is very emotional and fear-based. And I'm not saying that it's irrational in any way. I think much of it is very rational. Around, I don't trust these systems. I'm concerned about if I use these systems, I'm going to be part of kind of replacing myself and my own job. I'm contributing to like ecological disaster because these things are like, there's a lot of other kinds of things that people are registering as resistance to using AI and kind of taking it on in a thoughtful way. But I'm going to repeat that if at the organization level, if you don't do something about it, then your staff are using it 100%. Right? They are using AI all the time. So you are not avoiding any of those fears or consequences by not having a strategy around it. They're just happening without any guidance, guardrails, or anything from you. So that leaves us with this triple thing. We've got the AI challenges, we've got the cyber threats, we've got the political volatility. And so, Neela, when you said before I'm feeling overwhelmed, this is why. This is a lot. This is a lot. And I have full and complete sympathy and empathy for everybody who's feeling like it is too much. I hear you. And the best we can do is the best we can do. And that's what Kim and I are here to try to give you some tools for. And so with that, Kim, now you handed me all the doom and gloom and horrible stuff. And so Kim now gets to tell you all, here's what you can do about it to feel a little bit better.
And we switch back and forth on this part. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, it is a lot. And some of this, we're going to talk about things that you can kind of bake in to how you're working, right? Because one thing we didn't mention in the triple collision graphic there is, oh yeah, and you're trying to do the work you were already doing anyway, which is enormous. Okay.
Oh
So
yeah, that stuff. Yeah.
remember, like, so got it. And yes, so how to process this and kind of walk through it in a way that's manageable. That's like, okay, so a lot of folks aren't going to be out hiring, right? But how can we change practices to set ourselves up better? This, while it may be in response to all of this going on, these are good practices to have on a good day, right? So assessment and risk and understanding your risks. And I know a lot of organizations have been looking at risks, capital R risks across the board, but include technology in that. In other words, are we open to some cybersecurity risks, right? Do we have a tech champion on our board? Does anyone kind of believe, could anyone be a voice for technology for why can be a good thing to invest in even when times may be looking leaner or are leaner, right? Have you prioritized, right? And these are just basic principles of governance. Priorities, we teach a class on project management, right? And I would add almost project management as a bullet here. Like, how do you prioritize the various projects and initiatives that you have going on? And does your tech budget allow you to kind of, does it have strategy built in? Um, is that my icon? Um, uh,
I'm just putting project management there for it. You know,
Thank you.
there you go.
Um,
Yeah.
I really do feel like project management is a superpower, and the extent to which you can understand the portfolio of initiatives, tech, technology and otherwise. Project management kind of applies to everything, but managing the work and your portfolio of initiatives is part of governance. Um, all right, so the incident response plan, that's part of technology governance and more important these days with so much in chaos, right? Do you have an incident response plan? Have you tested it, walked it through? Have you done what's called a tabletop scenario planning? Okay, these are all kind of not high cost, don't have to bring in a new staff member types of things. And the last bullet here is tech skills and making sure staff get the skills that they need in order to kind of meet the challenge. And that includes AI, right? There's ways for people to get trained on AI. You can bring AI aboard so that people are using it in an organizationally aligned way and also using it in a way that helps them do their jobs. So,
Yeah. And on the next slide that Kim is talking about, which is what governance looks like as like an ongoing practice, then Kim, I'll leave it to you. Like, I just want to preface that when Kelly asked me what session ideas I had for this, I felt bad because I was kind of like, honestly, what I want to try to communicate is that um, and governance is such a kind of boring, unsexy word. Um, but it this idea of on a continuous basis being able to identify, right, what are we doing well that we want to continue doing? What do we want? What are challenges? What are opportunities? Right? How do we prioritize? How do we take in the things that we could do and decide what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, how we're going to measure whether it worked or not, and then do that as a continuous process so that we can continuously adapt and evolve as an organization, and manage all the stuff that's going on, the technology, the way people use that technology, the things that we can do with that technology that further our mission. In my view, these are things that nonprofits under 2,000, 3,000 staff, I've viewed, especially like under 100, but just historically really struggled to do, which totally makes sense. It's hard and it's not easy stuff to do, and it's easy not to do it. And I think it's been never great. But my concern is that right now, because of everything we've been talking about, it's moved from like not great to like an existential threat, not being able to do these things. So with that, Kim, tell them how to do these things.
um, I mean, it takes a lot out of it's basically the kind of the learn plan do, right? So we're getting back to some very basic continuous improvement practices. And these things make for a learning organization, right? Which is in and of itself a more resilient one, right? So when you're planning changes or projects or initiatives, okay, well, first question to always ask with any project, technology or otherwise, what problem is this solving for us? Right? And having an answer to that, right? And then once you understand the problem it's solving, how will we know we're solving it, right? Do we have measurable goals with that? And if we decide then that the project or initiative is kind of worth solving and we have goals that we can look at that will help us move forward, so then does it align our priorities? Do we have the resources? How are we going to do it, right? And this is where some of the project management thinking comes in. And I was listening to a podcast this morning about kind of project management and AI. I've been listening to that a lot. And it's funny, understanding roles and responsibilities is such a core. It's been around since they started talking about project management, whenever, right? In the stone age of PMI or whatever. But they still talk about the importance of roles and responsibilities. Although now with AI, just giving a shout out to that, we were advocating adding it to the RACI chart, right? The roles and responsibilities matrix. Who's responsible for what, right? You don't want AI to be accountable for anything. That's bad. But actually, what can it help you do? right? In times of diminishing resources, right? So implementing projects, knowing who's doing what, how are we going to get this done, right? And then continuing to measure and assess. And I am a big one, it's not really, I'm kind of going off topic here. I'm a big one for retrospectives and what I would call a mid-mortem as opposed to a post-mortem. Find out what's not working while you still have time to correct for it, right? And so these are all things that are part of a governance process. These don't have to be rigid. It's just ways of working together more effectively and toward the same objectives.
Right. So cybersecurity. There are some basics here. Most of you have probably heard these, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, right? The basics are multi-factor authentication. Increasingly, there are things called passwordless login. Google and Microsoft both support this, which is incredibly secure and has the added benefit of being really nice user experience for people because there's no password to remember or get phished out of or get compromised in a breach. And another thing to think about is something called single sign-on. So what that is you use your Microsoft or your Google account as what's called your IDP or your identity provider, right? And then you use that to authenticate to the other services that you use. So a goal might be to get the top 4 or 5 applications that your staff use on a regular basis all set up with like passwordless login and single sign-on so that when Kim needs to log in to RoundTable, she just logs in, gives her email address and nothing else. A little ping goes to her phone. She has to biometrically authenticate to her phone using her Face ID or Touch ID, say, yes, this is me and I'm trying to log in right now. And boom, not only is she in Google, she's in Salesforce, she's in Asana, she's in, Basecamp and all the other applications that she needs to use for her daily work. So that's a really nice system if you can get that set up and improves your security and makes things easier for your staff, which is not always and not even usually the case in security, right? Usually more security means less convenience, but this is one of those rare wins. So make sure that you have what are called immutable backups that would be resistant to a ransomware attack. All right, meaning they can't just be copies of things on the same systems that the attackers would ransomware in the first place. Probably the most important thing I would say is training your staff on a regular basis, however you can do that. RoundTable offers a free annual training called the Best Free 1-Hour Cybersecurity Awareness Training Ever. It's available for free on our website, but there are lots of platforms out there. A lot of them are discounted on TechSoup for nonprofits, and it is just incredibly important. Humans are well-trained humans who know what to do and are good defenders are absolutely without question the best cybersecurity defense you can have for your organization. Whereas poorly trained humans that are stressed out, that are clicking on stuff, that don't have a good understanding of what they are and are not supposed to do, are one of the biggest vulnerabilities you can have as an organization, and that is supported by huge amounts of data. And that's because humans sit at the intersection of everything that attackers want to get to, and the easiest thing to go after is the human. And they know they're there, right? Because remember, all this stuff is ultimately for humans. It's not for technology. So we talked about incident response plans. You can also do something that's quite easy. We have a guide for that on our website as well, which is called a tabletop exercise. And that's where you take a scenario and you kind of game it out as though it happened and see what your response looks like. Because that can only take a half an hour to an hour once a year and can be enormously instructive in helping you identify, oh, we didn't think about that, we didn't think about this, and can make you much better prepared. The goal with cybersecurity is like with all risk management, right? We cannot eliminate risk, right? So we know that bad things are going to happen. But well, thank you so much, Kim. But what we would really like to do is make it less likely that bad things happen and make the bad things less bad when they do happen, right? So it's one thing if I in terrible shape and have a terrible diet and don't sleep, and I get sick 8 times a year and twice a year. It's like a really bad flu, and I'm out of, out of office for a week. And it's another thing if I eat right and sleep and exercise, I might get sick a couple times a year, but it'll probably not be as bad and not as frequently. And that's the goal of cybersecurity. I can't promise that you're never going to get sick. And then please keep your stuff updated. Please, 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 please. That is one of the most common ways that people get compromised, is just having what are called unpatched systems that have vulnerabilities that are very easy for attackers to exploit. And if your device gets compromised, that is a bummer. I guess is the technical term for that. So you'd love to avoid that. Lots of low cost and free cybersecurity resources. N10 has a bunch of stuff. RoundTable, our company, has lots of stuff. TechSoup has lots of stuff. So there's lots of resources out there. At the risk of sounding immodest, I actually think RoundTable has some of the best free cybersecurity resources that are available. We have, I forget the link, but we have one where we have a bunch of
Yeah,
stuff all at one link. Yeah.
that's
We have
what I thought.
tabletop exercise and the AI acceptable use policy, and so we have a lot of really great free stuff on our website, and I encourage you to take advantage of all of it and don't feel like you owe us anything. Just go knock yourself out. All right, Kim, back to you.
Try to get you the link to that before. All right, so responsible mission-driven AI. So AI is here, and often the whole like, well, no, they just can't use it then. But we really discourage folks from going there because it can be an incredible help, especially when organizations find themselves resource constrained, and staff are already stressed. This can actually take some of the stress out of take some of the grunt out of the grunt work. And so you can focus on the human work. So in order to do that, though, providing training opportunities to staff around, AI. There's a lot out there, but and also TechSoup. Josh and I did a whole series for TechSoup, but there are, absolutely learning opportunities out there on AI. Adopt an AI policy. It doesn't have to be perfect because guess what? You're going to be changing it because AI changes. So take a look at the template. I dropped a link to an article about an AI policy template that also then gives you a link to the AI policy template. Start that as that can be starter soup, right? Basically, you want to identify for people what it is we can use here, what tools are okay, right? And often organizations on Microsoft, for example, 365, will start with Copilot. It's free. It's in your Microsoft subscription. It's part of it. And that way people are working safely because they're in your enterprise, right? I think also Google has Gemini, which I've been really impressed by lately, I will say. Start to identify some of those ways that AI can help with your workflows. What types of things can it automate? What types of things can it help you augment? Right? It's not taking anyone's job, but it can make certain tasks that are like routine, the types of things. What are the things that people don't like working on? That's one way to start. And then think about kind of how do we scale this up? How do we help a department adopt this well? Right. But it's important to do it as an organization and not as one-off separately, because that's where people get free tools. Free tools may not have the best security, etc. So mission.
And I'm, massively biased here, so I'll just own that because I use AI all the time, all day, every day, for a whole range of things, both personal and professional. Find it incredibly useful, incredibly fun, incredibly quirky, certainly far from perfect, but so one quick thing is that from a data standpoint, we're still getting data around AI productivity, and a lot of it depends on the nature of the job and the nature of how someone uses it. But as a reference point, since World War II, non-farm labor, which is generally speaking all of us, right, knowledge workers, productivity increases year over year on average have been about 1.5% to 2%. So that's since after World War II, coming up on like 80-ish years now. We've seen very steady productivity growth. early signs or early data from people who are adopting AI effectively in the knowledge work areas, which is again is all of us, are seeing anywhere from 30 to 60% productivity improvements. So you're talking about multiple decades of productivity improvement over a period of 3 months for people that are effectively using these tools. I think Kim and I, who use these a lot, would say that seems about right in terms of the quality and quantity of work that we're able to do. And not only that, but able to do things that we simply couldn't do before. So I'm not like a data analyst and data visualization expert, but because I have learned how to do some of those things with AI tools, I can now make a pretty impressive like data visualization dashboard from a bunch of random spreadsheets in like half an hour or 40 minutes. And it's interactive and it's pretty good. And I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a data visualization expert, but that's just one of many, many examples. And I realize that the AI is part of the overwhelm for many of you, but I want to encourage you that AI can be something that can very much help you with the overwhelm if you are willing to sort of learn it and give it a chance. I just want to say that it's not going anywhere. So you can hate it and not trust it and resist it all you want. But the reality is just like if you didn't like computers, didn't like telephones, didn't like smartphones, didn't like social media, didn't like television. I get all that, but these things still happen. So, anything else you want to say on that, Kim?
No, that's
Okay, was my TED talk too long? Should I
no,
end
no,
it?
no, no.
Oh, okay, okay. We're doing all right on time. So, all right. So advocacy and scenario planning. In terms of, when you're doing tabletop exercise and incident response and threat modeling, like threat modeling, Kim and I mostly do it in the cybersecurity, data privacy, AI space, but it applies to everything: financial risk, political risk, legal risk, operational risk, psychological risk. I wrote an article, maybe Kim, you could pop that in there, the nonprofit staff are scared, that kind of talks about 5 different areas to kind of think about and ways you can address a lot of the ways that staff and I'm sure many of you are scared of digital threats, the cybersecurity things we've been talking about, scared of legal threats, scared of financial threats and bad things happening financially. In many cases, scared of physical threats. So Kim and I work with a lot of organizations where people are legitimately afraid of international travel, of being doxxed, of being harassed in their homes. And that's real. And then, of course, all of that kind of comes together to create a lot of psychological risk for which we think of as kind of nebulous, but doesn't have to be that nebulous. There are lots of really practical things you can do to increase psychological resilience at your organization and really communicate to staff like, look, we hear that we understand you're scared, we're scared too. Here are things that we can do, here are things we will do, here are things that we can help you with, but you would have to participate, and here are things that are kind of your own to deal with. And that article, thank you, Kim, is kind of addressing a lot of that. So figure out what are the threats that might be coming and how you would respond to it. One thing about anxiety is that uncertainty in this kind of nebulous tends to be worse than actually certainty. So a lot of times the anticipation of something bad happening turns out to be worse than the actual bad thing when it happens. And which sounds really weird, but
Mhm.
worrying about a bad thing happening, sometimes you're almost weirdly relieved when it does happen because it's like, okay, now it's happened. I don't have to worry about it happening anymore, right? And so if you start to game out these scenarios of how you will respond, if it can alleviate some of that anxiety, but you do have to overcome that kind of cognitive dissonance that's keeping you from wanting to think about unpleasant and uncomfortable things. And I totally get that. Again, so I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy for me or easy for Kim or anybody else. It's hard. But ultimately, I find it's better when I do it and I feel better after it. So anyway, and definitely, build some relationships and coalitions with organizations that have similar threats and risks to you. And you can absolutely strengthen your advocacy if you work together. And then, of course, build these contingency plans. Think about what are we going to do if these things happen so you're not caught totally unaware and unprepared when these things go on. And again, these kind of tools that we're talking about, incident response plans, table talk exercises, they're generally specific to digital threats, but they're very um, uh, they relate and apply to these other things very easily. All right, Kim, you want to take us home?
Sure. So, all right. So think of technology governance like finance governance, right? So you want to, uh, you know, define your process around it. So here's a couple like kind of next actions that are not necessarily easy. It's like, go home and bake a cake. It's not quite like that. But do a tech review at your next board meeting, right? Bring it up. Can it be on the agenda? I know there's a lot on people's agendas. Okay, so security basics, so the 20% of efforts, right, that deliver what Joshua talked about on the slide, and if nothing else, training, right, because the human element is can be the weakest link in cybersecurity. So enable an MFA and on all critical accounts, and I would add to that and provide training. AI, so your next action on that, take a look at the AI acceptable use policy template if you don't already have one in your organization. If you do, yay. But think about how you would adapt that for your organization, right? And
We stopped doing polls about who has AI policies in place because we got too depressed like a year ago. Like for a year we were polling. It
for
kept being like 2%. We were just like,
like
okay.
3 years we've been polling. In the beginning, it was kind of not that surprising.
Yeah.
It was, but now it's like, no, you still don't have one. So, and an advocacy and community. And, I was talking to some nonprofits recently, that have really been hit hard by this because of the nature of the work they do and where they do it. And, one of the things I asked, like, what would have been the most helpful to you as this is all coming down? And they said community and other partners. So, and I know the nonprofit community at large has been doing some really good stuff, and Cerini and the Nonprofit Tech Hub, these are groups, these are places you can come together to support each other because these are hard times. And I think that leaves us,
With Q&A, I think we just have a couple of minutes, but
yeah, if anyone has any burning questions
yeah, you
or
can
think about
unmute yourself if you're, I think we can unmute you if you raise your hand, or you can let us know in the chat. Yeah, we got 3 minutes left. If anyone's got questions, we're happy to try to help any way we can. I think Christina left, but yes, I definitely used AI, which is easy to tell because it has like a misspelling. Because I just gave up trying to get it to spell
oh,
the things right. Yeah, I was trying to get to like the pie pieces to be the five like areas, and it's just like I'm done. I give up.
um,
I could take it out into like Adobe Air and get it
that,
fixed, but that's just like no. All right. Well, it looks like we do not have any questions. We'll give it like 10 more seconds. And if no one raises a hand or drops something in the chat, we will say goodbye to everybody. But thank you. We hope that the session was helpful for you. And our thoughts are certainly with all of you. And we wish you all the best over the coming years. I feel every confidence in the world that we are going to thrive through all this. I really do believe that. Uh, but yeah, we're going to have to work. But that's okay. That's what we're here for.
all right. Well,
All right. Bye all.
thank you, everyone.